Everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about alcohol and how it relates to retirement. So, did you know that while the rest of the country is actually drinking less, alcohol related deaths for people over 65 have jumped 24% in the last few years? That's a hidden epidemic in the retirement community, and it's often not about partying. It's really more about a daily routine that slowly gets out of hand. That transition into retirement, it's often romanticized as a permanent vacation. But for many, this does trigger a significant shift in habits. Research shows that heavy drinking can increase nearly 5% within the first year of retiring. And there's a health reality behind that. Alcohol induced mortality is 24% higher than it was just in 2018. So we're talking 8 years earlier. Alcohol is a leading contributor to falls in retirees. Even when you drink moderately, that does increase the risk of hip fractures because alcohol does affect your balance and it also thins out your bones. And osteoporosis is something that, particularly for females, but even males, is something that can cause significant health issues. Long term drinking, in addition, can link to early onset dementia and memory loss. A lot of times, this is just mistaken for normal aging process, but in reality, it is affected and impacted by the use of alcohol. There's also other risks related to medication. Nearly 90% of adults over 65 take at least one prescription medication. Personally, I take three. So I'm, in that company. And 40% of people over 65 take five or more medications. So think about the effects of how alcohol may mix with those medications, much less the medications just interacting with one another. And there are things like blood pressure meds, sleep aids, or blood thinners that can really not play well when it comes to alcohol. Now, there's also a physiological trigger as well. Even if you're drinking the same amount now as you were when you were 35, 40, or 45, the reality is our bodies have less muscle mass, slower liver function, and as a result, what you were able to drink before versus what you're able to drink now can be drastically different. And, it's something that they commonly call late onset problem drinking, because something that was not a problem when you were younger is a problem now, even though you're drinking the same exact amount. So, why do retirees tend to drink more than younger generations? About half, it's due to social reasons. Also, 38% they say drink primarily to relax. 13% say they drink simply because it's part of their daily routine. And another 8 to 10% drink out of boredom, out of loneliness, or just to cope with the pain, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional pain. And one of the things I found interesting is that men and women, when I was doing my research, they tend to drink for different reasons. Men are more likely to drink because of their lack of social ties. All of a sudden, they're no longer working their jobs. Their social activities revolved a lot around their work. And also, they may have been involuntarily retired. They may have stressed because of that. And now, all of a sudden, most people in their social circle are no longer a part of that social circle. Women, however, they're drinking more because of either loneliness, because of being an empty nester and not having their kids around. And, they also may experience conflict with that spouse that all of a sudden is now around 24/7, whereas they weren't before. And, so we talked about this, the loss of identity, losing that job title, something again, not just men are exclusive to that, but that is something that does probably hit men a little harder. one of the things when you retire, you go through this honeymoon phase because in your mind, you've been planning it for years and years and years, and how great it would be to travel or just sit on the beach and relax or play golf all the time. And once that honeymoon phase ends, there's that disenchantment phase where the reality hits that, oh, this isn't what it's all about. I can't party my way through 30 years of retirement. And there's that void that kind of sets in. Um, in addition, obviously, boredom can set in, not having that 9 to 5 structure where everything else is crammed into, 5 to 9, or on the weekends. You all of a sudden have a bunch more time on your hands, and because of that, you choose to drink because it's there. And likewise, there could be this opposite effect of your social calendar being so filled up where every day is Saturday. This is particularly prevalent in 55 and over communities where they have happy hours every night. And there are some people that will indulge in that every single night. And that's something that can force an increased amount of alcohol consumption. And then obviously there's no breaks. It's all gas, no breaks. So if I overconsume, I just go to bed. I don't have to wake up tomorrow. I don't have an early morning meeting. I don't have to worry about calling out. If I'm hungover, I can just sleep it off. So those are some of the social and emotional reasons. There's also physical reasons, right? So as you get older, probably about a third of people suffer from chronic pain, whether it's arthritis, whether it's mobility issues, whether it's bad knees, bad hips. I personally have a touch of arthritis in my neck, and they may tend to turn to alcohol rather than other solutions such as physical therapy, going to the gym, or something else. We talked about spouses, and all of a sudden you go from seeing each other from 5 to 9 to all of a sudden being together 24/7. And that can certainly cause a lot of stress. And as a result, one of those ways to relieve stress is obviously to consume an alcohol, just to escape that tension. The other thing is, and this is something I didn't think of, but I saw it in my research, and the busyness of a career kind of takes your mind off a lot of things. And one of the things that I noticed in my research is that trauma or whatever mistakes you made in the past or things that happened to you in the past, all of a sudden that you had buried deep inside you, can all of a sudden bubble to the surface. And because you're bored, you're just running these things back through your mind. And as a Gen Xer who has probably had that pumped into them to, not express emotions and keep your feelings hidden, that's something that really kind of hit home to me. Some of the financial impacts, obviously, all of a sudden, when you are retired, you are living off your retirement savings, your Social Security, some of these other things. Think about it like this. If you go to a restaurant 3 nights a week, we're not talking a lot, right? So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe. And you just have 2 drinks a week, that's going to cost about $90 a week, depending on what kind of drinks you get. I'm more of a beer guy, so it would be less. But even that is still going to add up. But at $90 a week, just in alcohol, okay, that's going to be almost $5,000 a year. And, that habit within 5 years can be almost $25,000. You can get a high-end gym renovation. You can buy a camper to go traveling. There are so many things that you could do with that money instead of literally just drinking it away. And this isn't to say you should never have a drink, but it is something to be conscious of. And then preventing that retirement slide into that heavy drinking really isn't just about willpower, it's about system design, right? So having that system in place that you had for the past 40 years that dictated your time, and that was your job. Now it's up to you to build your own. So I think there are a few things that you could do to kind of prevent that. And I think is, first, not having too much space in your calendar. You don't want to be overbooked. Retirement is the time to relax. But really having what you might call a 3-pillar day. So have one activity every day, and it doesn't need to be a 2-hour activity. It could be half hour that falls into social, physical, or productive. Okay. And then having one of those be what I would call an anchor event. And I would say the best time to schedule that is probably sometime between 4 and 6 p.m. So, and why is that? Because that's that danger zone. That's happy hour time, right? So if you're going to the gym instead of going to happy hour, that's a way to resist that temptation. That's one of the things that I have personally done. A lot of times when I was younger, I would go to the bar. Well, now I'm going to the gym. So I've basically put that anchor activity in place for myself. And then really also, I think, designing your retirement. And in the last video, one of the things I talked about, it was a no-buy year, right? So I was talking about not buying any alcohol to bring into the house. And, again, if your home is constantly stocked with alcohol, then you're going to be more likely to drink it. So in this case, if you can remove that temptation from your physical space, and that is something that's going to put that friction between you and drinking. One of the other things, and I thought this was interesting, is really upgrading your glassware. Sometimes it's not the alcohol we miss, it's the ritual, right? So getting nicer glassware is something you could have and have your own happy hour, but just have it without the alcohol, right? You still have the nice fancy glasses to make it feel like you are drinking or you're, enjoying that activity, but in reality, you're just making that routine a little bit different and putting your own spin on it. The other thing is we do tend to get in these social circles and these cliques. I think finding activities that are not centered around alcohol, you will end up finding people that their lives are not centered around alcohol. So joining clubs that have some sort of focus that's not tied to happy hour, right? So whether it's a book club or a pickleball league, gardening, meeting in libraries, a book club, whatever your thing is that you think you would enjoy, I think that's something that you could put into place. And then, again, you're creating a social circle with people that have like interests. The other thing is, if you do have friends that, even if they are, have a tendency to indulge in happy hour or do some of these other things, suggest activities at other times of the day. So instead of hitting happy hour or going to the bar, ask them if they want to go to breakfast or if they want to meet for lunch. Generally, it's going to be cheaper, one, because you're not buying alcohol, but typically breakfast and lunch entrees are cheaper than dinner, even if you are going to the happy hour dinner. And then also, we talk about retirement, and a lot of people believe that retirement is one of those things where, quite frankly, you need to just sit around and do nothing. I am not a believer of that. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always done things that, quite frankly, have kept me busy, just like this YouTube channel, right? So there are ways of just doing smaller, micro entrepreneurial type activities. I recently got, and I say recently, but we're going back almost 3 years. I'm almost to the point where I have to renew it. I became a notary. I don't do a lot of notary work simply because I work full time. However, in retirement, that may be something that I could do. I also own a pet sitting business that takes up a lot of time. However, doing the occasional dog walk or pet sit is a great way to earn extra money. Those are things you can find your niche and do what you want to do. And again, that's going to be something that keeps you busy. Create a YouTube video. Doesn't need to be about retirement. It could be about whatever you like it to be. And it's not about the monetization or anything else. It's about getting your voice out there. And then, also creating some sort of list on how you want to train, whether it's walking. I have friends that are runners. They've run in marathons. That is not my gig. So, I have a different routine, but I think finding some sort of routine that gets you physical exercise is also something that I found has made me desire to drink less. Just psychologically, because I feel healthier, I have less of a desire to drink. And I think, doing that as well can be something that helps you. And then one of the things is just assessing, and having a reality check with your physician. I know a lot of times I'll go into their physicals and they ask you these questions, and they ask you, how often do you drink? And I'm never honest. It's always lower, and I'm sure the doctors can see through that BS, right? But I think obviously being honest and really just being upfront with them, the doctors are there to help you. So I think from that standpoint, having a situation where you have that accountability partner, whether it's a doctor or whether it's a friend, where you can be 100% honest about how much you drink. The good thing is the physician is going to tell you some of the detrimental effects. And, it's really about the concern for your health, and having that accountability partner in place does provide that for you. Now, the secret to a sober retirement isn't about trying harder. It's about designing better. You didn't start working, or you didn't stop working just to start surviving a daily habit. You retired to finally live. So build a day that's so good you don't feel the need to escape it with a glass of wine or a glass of beer. So if this helped, tap like and subscribe so we can count down to chill together.